conservatory or a
Yeah.
show. It's, you know, it's a miracle we don't crumble to the ground. I'd never seen anyone say they like their own playing. I was kind of like, I can do that? Like, that's not, shouldn't be allowed. So I'm thinking of A major, and Lord knows what any of that is. I'm just moving, but
Your bending feels like out of tune.
yeah, oh yeah,
Like-
you're on to me.
But so today I had the immense pleasure and honor to have Julian Lage in the studio. Julian is recognized as one of the greatest guitarists of this era, and he's known for his exceptional technical mastery. I've never seen anyone shred like him, to be honest. And his expressive musicality will leave you speechless. So if you have the chance to go check him out playing live, I'm sure, just do it. You won't regret it. Anyway, for now, let's enjoy a conversation that turned into one of the most inspiring ones I've ever had. And it just shows you how deep the exploration of the guitar and the mind can go. Enjoy. Telly and the Strat.
Together at last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining me in this guitar video. We're going to talk about the guitar.
Yes.
That's going to be the main focus, but we're not too sure yet how to fly into the subject because there's so many things to talk about. Your whole approach to the guitar just fascinates me so much.
Thanks, man.
Your music, and I think you are one of the very few musicians who really influenced my touch on the guitar.
Wow.
Because it's so precise and exact, and I just, whenever I tried playing your music, I had to really work on those finesse touches. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally do. Yeah.
And I would love to get some of that, like first-hand tips right now. Is that something we can talk about? Maybe.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for letting me be part of this and doing this with me. I'm
amazing.
I'm thrilled. And also I want to acknowledge what you say about touch on the instrument. That means a lot to me. That it's been meaningful to you. I do think about touch a lot. Frankly, I think every guitar player does. You know, on some level, we understand whether theoretically or academically or just viscerally that this instrument is about translating movement. The way we move, the way we touch it is usually the way it sounds and the way it feels when you hear it. So there's a bit of a transformation that happens from movement to sound, and it's deeply mysterious. You know,
Yeah.
I don't.
I think it's one of the most direct instruments, maybe apart from the voice, that literally your finger is on the tone.
Yeah. Well, it's true. And it's there's a directness to it, but there's also this. What I've noticed often is that a lot of other factors, apart from the fingers, affect the sound. And I'll tell you what I mean a little bit. Our breathing, you know, if I'm holding my breath versus if I'm not holding my breath, that's a completely different timbre to the sound. Often when there's a little, it doesn't mean one's better than the other. They're just different, you know. There's some anatomical things that are kind of interesting when the breath is held and the ribs are kind of sucked in. Often the arms kind of get pulled in too, and there's a certain kind of
tension.
Yeah, tensional balance in the arms that resolves in sometimes a stiffer movement. You know, like you're not like that. You're kind of shoving your hand around. You know, and that has a sound that affects your touch. You know, that affects your touch.
Will you give me one example of?
Well, I'll do my
playing
best.
sort of the same phrases and then one very open
Sure.
and one more
tighter. Let's see. Let me see if I can do that. If I were, let's see. Let me. Here, I'll hold my breath and kind of bear down a little bit. Let's see what that sounds like. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the way that sounds. You know, it's like I said before, it's not that one is better than the other. What I noticed, though, is that through the course of the phrase, I'm getting fatigued. I can kind of feel it. I kind of feel
restless.
Yeah, restless.
Oh, I need to breathe.
Yeah, I need to
Where's
exactly.
the resolvement? We need.
Well, absolutely. And rather than just stop and breathe, what I inevitably do is I end up just playing more notes, you know, as if this is going to save me. The guitar is not going to save me. So, and so it's, I want to just pause right there and acknowledge there's a connection between, and touch in what we're talking about. There's a connection, a very obvious connection between that and the content of what I'm playing. So I just want to be clear. When I'm talking about touch, I'm talking about also the phrase development. How it's moving, where it's going in an improvisation. So in that case, the touch was pleasant enough, but I felt a little claustrophobic in my body. Now, if I allow myself at those moments where, okay, I notice I'm holding my breath, I notice I'm kind of doing that thing, it happens to all of us, it's natural. If I, at those moments, just pause and kind of reorganize, so to speak, allow myself to just kind of recalibrate and then continue playing, it sounds different. So let's see if it sounds different. But I'll start on the same A.
Sweet, yeah.
So it's a whole different vocabulary in a way.
Yeah.
And it's one that maybe is more in touch, or at least considered aware, I should say, that my body and my physicality it needs to be acknowledged and taken care of. And for me, it's sometimes as simple as embarking on a line, having an agenda. Okay, I'm going there, but saying, I don't feel great, you know, or I this is kind of a lot. And just... And in those pauses, often I think there's a redirection musically that happens too, you know.
I love that. Yeah. What I did notice as well is you played more in clusters or more...
Yeah, wasn't that it? Yeah, true. I don't know, somehow it was funny, it seemed like that was more... that emerged as being what was appropriate in that moment, given the sound and the touch. So, please.
When you were just playing, did you follow a sort of... progression in your mind, or were you just leaning on the melody and giving it a sort of more substance with some bass notes here and there?
I think that. I think just adding substance as I went. You know, it's funny because I don't know about you. I remember growing up and feeling like there was these kind of two camps. You know, there was lines. I got to make lines that are good, and then. That's one camp. The other camp is I've got to play chords that are cool, and I've got to play bass lines and counterpoint, and they always seemed different, and kind of almost like one of these things where I had to earn the right to dabble in it. You know what I mean? Like I'm not good enough to do them together, so I'm gonna just keep playing lines. I'm gonna just do double stops, but very rarely together. And over the years, I do feel like. You know, I can kind of drop that. If I'm playing a line and I crave reinforcement, play it. You know, if I don't, if it's too thick, stop it. You know, there are these kind of simpler. I don't say simple as in not considered, but sometimes you just have to trust. Kind of your fan brain, you know, the music fan brain that just hears stuff and says that's cool, or that could be cooler, or I don't like that, or you know, and obviously not in a self-hating way or in a way that bogs you down, but just remembering this is music and you got to play what you think is cool. And it's amazing how many times in my life I've wanted to play what I thought was cool, but maybe stopped because I thought there was a better theoretical agenda. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, why should I'm playing bebop lines? I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't play an open string, right?
Yeah, because you in jazz there's sort of the bending.
Oh
thing.
yeah, sure.
So, I've heard about stories where jazz teachers said no bending. Is that something that happened to you? Or?
Well, I never was good. I never bent a lot to begin with. I kind of have a stoic hand. I just kind of plop down. But I've heard those stories, and I've had friends who went through that experience. And to me, it's so ridiculous because if we're going to be historical about it, you know, you go back to George Barnes, who was one of the greatest kind of founders of jazz guitar. And to my understanding, he was the first recorded electric jazz guitar player on a Big Bill Brunsey record. I think he was about 16. I forget the name of the song. But anyway, he he plays a solo, and it's fantastic, and but he's bending. I mean, like really wild the whole time, and so you'll see historically that was in the vocabulary.
Yeah.
And then from the 30s into the 40s, things got a little cooler. And then by the 50s, things got really cool, meaning, guitar was less bends, less a lot of people were doing it as they always are. But so even a notion like that, requires investigation.
But I think your bendings are one of the most recognizable in the game. It's because is it something you deliberately? Your bending feels like deliberately, and I'm not meaning this like out of tune.
Yeah, oh yeah,
like
totally.
Very blue, like, and for a long time as well. Sometimes you never even reach the point that I feel like you're going to.
Yeah, totally. You're on to me.
But
yeah,
but
well, I'm glad. Yeah, I mean, pitch is a funny thing. I don't have perfect pitch, far from it. But there are.
Yeah, exactly. There is exactly
colors.
what I mean.
But also sometimes, full disclosure, I think, is that I might be trying to just bend in tune, realizing that I'm, two notes aren't in tune, and I'm trying to get one closer. I'm trying to think of an example of that. That's an example of. I know that's deliberately rubbing, but for me it sounds really nice, especially when you're going to something so wholesome.
That's a resolution.
That's a resolution, right? So there's an intersection between intonation, which is what we're talking about. Where is it in tune? Is it out? Is it bend? Is it not? There's an interaction with that, and also what harmony. What are you doing harmonically? And so I think I'm to just pivot the conversation slightly because I think it relates. I'm fond of things often, or vocabulary where there's, let's say, a tonal center, like we're talking about A major, but rather than just play A major information, I'm kind of slipping in and out of multiple keys. I was doing that just a moment ago. These kind of. So I'm thinking of A major, and Lord knows what any of that is. I'm just moving. But when things get kind of shaky like that, in meaning you can't rely on one sound, then what's to stop us from also playing with those same parameters with intonation?
Yeah,
I guess that's the point. So it's hard for me to think of it. I'll put it a different way. I prefer to think of these things as integrated, considerations. Intonation, harmonic, melodic, rhythmic, intent. It's kind of they're always on display.
So what you were just playing, you were just following. How did you end up there? Because you said I have no idea what I did.
Well, not theoretically. I mean,
Yeah, but you knew the sounds that were coming. You expected what you heard, right?
Kind of. I'm in a way as surprised as anybody else might. It's funny just even doing. It's very funny to talk about these things because I can't say that I can do them justice by speaking about them. Partially because I think there's a beautiful phenomenon that we all know so well about the guitar, which is that it's incredibly forgiving. If we play anything, it will make a sound. Well, whether we like it or not, or know what to do with it, is a whole different question. But there's something to be said about kind of moving through the instrument, through the fretboard, and just kind of discovering, oh, well, that's cool. Oh, let me keep moving. What if this finger goes here, this finger? And I have to say, in my life, I've spent a lot of time being curious about that. Less of a systematic player of, well, here's where my chords are, and more just like, let me just spend 5 minutes kind of crawling up the fingerboard and you know, hitting things that go, oof, that, no, you know. But I guess trying to make friends with it. Another way to put it is that there was a time in my life where I spent so much energy avoiding things. Like, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to stay on the tracks. I should really just stick to what I know, or I should stick to what, you know, I think I'm supposed to play. And it's occurred to me so many times that takes a lot of energy. You know, so that's a lot of, I was spending, you know, so much energy avoiding things, and I kind of want that energy back to just play. So you might have 70% going into avoidance and 30% playing, and then you hear yourself back and you go, wow, I don't sound as strong as I thought I was.
A little bit stifled.
Yeah, a little bit stifled. And you think, I mean, because you're spending all your energy just like freaked out, you know. So if you are allowed the time and space to explore and kind of make some bad decisions on the guitar, it can be very helpful.
Yeah. I think in defense of other music genres where this might not be the best idea, like let's say you're a session player in Nashville and you have to track that solo for that song.
Yeah.
Doing an approach like this might not always yield the best result, right?
I wouldn't know. I don't get called for those gigs.
But that's what I love, that you are very much your choice, like by avoiding these boundaries, also made the style of your music the way it is.
Well, that's a very elegant assessment. I appreciate you saying that it is, because I think you're right. I think, you know, if I think of the players that I respond to and have been around and love, there tends to be a holistic nature to them, that they kind of play the way they talk, the way they move, the way they think, and I've been so inspired by these players to realize that's available to all of us. You know, it's not to say that you either have to go completely rogue and make yourself unavailable to a certain genre. It's not to say that at all. It's just saying within that, you know, like Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. You know, like I do think being a musician is a beautiful endeavor, because you can be imaginative, and you can be adventurous and daring and take risks. Another truth, I think, is that boundaries and restrictions often do lead to freedom. You know, like when you have, I have a 12-bar blues, I've heard it, like we were speaking about before, we've heard it millions of times, and I really want to play a solo where I, you know, stay within this scale. And I just want to, you know, that's very liberating. So, or any number of parameters. So in other words, it's not necessarily saying you throw it all away and just do anything all the time. It's just personal. Yeah. And in my case, if we go back to what I was saying about before, I think I was just moving my hand and kind of listening to the results and seeing what happened.
It's interesting. Yeah.
It's cool. I seem to do that a lot, you know.
I love it when I'm sitting here. Sometimes I want to record a video for whatever, Instagram, a quick video. Yeah. And I'm just messing around, and I love it, but it always well, let's just put it mildly, it doesn't end up the way I want it. So I end up not posting it on Instagram. Yeah. But in those explorations, I find many cool things.
That's great.
So even though I don't post anything, I had a lot of fun, like going.
I want to hear all of that stuff from you, man. You're such a great player. I know it's amazing. I mean, it's true though. It's we each have to kind of, I do believe, find a relationship to it. What are we comfortable with sharing? What are we? There's a true nature that we all possess that I do think is free. You know, we possess something that has, it's the same feeling I think probably, well, I felt when I first picked up a guitar. This is great. I don't know anything, but I love it. So nothing was wrong, you know? And I do think as we play more and more that we have a decision often to make. Do we want to keep cultivating that? Do we want to suppress it? Yeah. It's personal.
So in your opinion, when you're maybe watching this video and you're thinking, this is a little bit over my head still because I'm still practicing the pentatonic scale, for example, where do you think that all falls in this discussion? Do you think when you start out there is some form of regiment practice is good? Absolutely.
I think, again, just to be clear, I don't think this is something you earn the right to think about. No. I think it's the overall, and that's what's important, because, you know, growing up in so much academia for music and guitar study, I mean, I'm obsessed with this stuff, and I study it, and I have since I was very young. I've always felt like there was a feeling like you weren't allowed to take risks until you kind of ate your vegetables, so to speak.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think all I'm saying is that you can do it side by side.
Yes. Yeah.
And a good example, you know, what you're talking about is practicing scales, arpeggios, triads. I've seen incredible videos you've done about some of these topics where you're delving into what I would consider very knowable concepts. In other words, these are things that you can, we can know them. We can know where a C is. We can know what how to play triads. We can know where the notes are on the guitar. Mm-hmm. And if you ask me, quite frankly, I think it's our responsibility to deal with all of that stuff as soon as possible, so that we are more liberated to kind of focus on the music.
Wow, yeah.
You know, but I've often felt like there was how do I say it? Maybe a resistance to the notion that we could ever really know something. Almost like it's being immodest to say, well, no, I'm still working on scales. I'm still... Because I do think at a certain point you kind of need to say, I know them. I know. I'm good. These notes aren't changing anytime soon. I can play this and I feel comfortable and I can, like you said... I know what that feels like to know it. Now, just a point of clarification. I don't say that from from a point of arrogance or saying I'm so great at it and I'm the best. It's not all that. It's more this. If you're practicing scales, if you're learning the building blocks of whatever it is, you know, it could be there's so many building blocks. Ideally, you want to know what it feels like to master them, mm-hmm. so that you can have a sensitivity to when you're traveling into new territories where you don't know what you're doing.
Okay.
I used to do an exercise. I know I've talked about it before, but it was very helpful for me. It was kind of having like pick something that I felt like a master of, so to speak, so that I could feel my body and say, well, if that's what being good at something feels like, I want to feel that now when I go to these other harder topics. Wow. And a very simple example would be like playing a C chord. Mm-hmm. Again, there's no arrogance or ego around this, but
just joining in.
Join, please. So I'm sure when you play that, probably feels comfortable, right? Like you've done it before. You've done it before. Yeah. You're able to. You're able to play with it. Whatever that feeling is that you have, where you're able to think, talk to me, take risks, play. Yeah. That kind of environment that exists around that chord.
Is that a feeling inside me?
I don't know. Yeah, it could be a feeling inside of you. It could just be a bandwidth thing. Like you're able to play it and talk. Like that means you probably have it stored somewhere deep in there. You're able to. In other words, you're not going. Wait, is it? No, it's You're not totally consumed by the practical.
Yes, the thought can go everywhere.
You're free,
and you're still able.
You're
to
free. Yeah. So that to me, that feeling, however you might experience it, that's kind of a blueprint for what it feels like to be good at something. Mm. And that's a blueprint that I think you can carry around as you go through the topics.
Yeah.
When I play in B flat major, can I play the scale and still maintain that? Mm. Well, no, because I don't really remember if it's an E or an E flat. Okay, well then fix that, stitch that up. Now play it again. I can do that with triads, but except when I do open voice, then I get kind of panicked. Okay, well then that's where you need to work. So in other words, we're getting feedback all the time from our system about kind of how comfortable we're at. Yeah. And I think it's imperative that we don't override that and don't, that we listen. We listen to the cues because I think it helps us button up some of the issues.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
It's an approach. It's how I've kind of navigated.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people are insecure about their own abilities. Like, where am I? Am I an intermediate player? But really, it's just a word to categorize something of you. If you look at singer-songwriters, they're probably or often not super well versed into shreddy territory or scales high up the neck, but they do know their way around.
That's a great point.
Playing a beautiful chord progression that supports their voice, for example. Maybe even better than we are.
100%. No, God, you frame that really well. I mean, I think it's about kind of knowing where you stand in your progress. I don't think any of us care whether we're beginner, intermediate, or advanced. We just love it. Yeah. but it's very scary. It can be frightening to have no idea if you're where you are.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we kind of latch on to systems of learning so that we have an identity. I'm a beginner because I'm studying this beginner thing. I'm an advanced because I'm studying this advanced thing.
Yeah.
And that can be true. But I don't know about you, but in my life I've misdiagnosed, you know. I've stayed a beginner in something that it was kind of inappropriate for me to stay a beginner in.
Oh wow.
You know,
Really?
I'd be kind of coming back to soloing a certain way because I thought that's what I should be doing, and then I'd play with musicians who'd say, I need to hear you. I need to hear music. I don't want to hear what you're practicing. And I'd go, I think I need to move on.
It's dangerous as well, because I remember I never played jazz or heard jazz until I was like 18 years old or something.
Yeah.
And I figured, hey, wait a minute, I want to be a professional guitarist. Why don't I know this stuff? So I was listening to some jazz and I figured how to learn jazz. Play over 2-5-1s was something I found.
Sure.
So I found backing tracks in all 12 keys of
Yeah.
2-5-1s, and I was playing over it, and I felt terrible. I felt really, really bad, and I felt sort of insecure about who even am I as a guitar player if I'm not able to play over 2-5-1s and follow the chords and changes. And then I realized it's not who I am. It's just not who.
Good for you.
It isn't even who I want to be.
Yeah.
And I don't like the lines I'm playing, even if it's following like the 2-5-1s beautifully. Yeah. And I just sort of let it go, and I just learned so much about. I fell in love with the acoustic guitar, how it sounds, with open tunings, with you know, just following the melody and just what I'm playing. I love how it sounds, and I think that's one of the most important things. Actually, in the end, like if you like how it sounds, what's coming out of your instrument, I think that's the magic. Where
I think that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
I love too how you say that. I mean, it sounds like you learned exactly what you needed to learn from that pursuit. You know, okay, I did this. I realized it wasn't for me, and that's worth a lot. I mean, I think it's part of it's faith. You will be guided to where your true nature is. You will, and sometimes interfacing with material that's challenging or unusual or new to you,
or internet opinions.
Oh, sure. Well, that's
no, you actually you suck.
Yeah, that's a terrifying place. I stay away from that place the best I can, because it, you know, it's I used to talk about with my dad. We would talk about reviews, you know, getting reviews on a record or something, and I never really read any of them because he'd say, oh, but it's favorable. You know, make you feel good. I thought, listen, if I take the good, I also have to take the bad. I have to believe that this is accurate and helpful. And since I'm a student of this music, I've always felt it most important to cultivate my own ability to gauge how things are going. And let me be clear, it doesn't mean it's correct all the time. You know, I sometimes I'll misdiagnose. I really need to work on this, and I'll work on it for months. Like kind of with you with the 2-5-1s. Like, you know, this is really important. Okay, if you say so, and then you do it, and then you have some moment that you know you just get like hit in the head, and you go, oh, that's a total waste. That's not at all what I want to do. Yeah. But to me, that's also worth it because you go, okay, well, it's genuine. You know,
check that off.
Yeah, I did it. Now I can really focus on what I want.
And also sometimes when you're practicing things that maybe doesn't come from inside you, it doesn't stick.
Well, that's true.
Because it isn't a part of your playing. Sometimes you can take something from it, of course, but usually if you're spending so much time on something that isn't really you, it just doesn't flow into your playing.
I've felt that many times, you know. I'm not a terribly good mimic. You know, I know players who, they can kind of fake styles. They can play in a style or sound close enough, and I've always admired that because I thought, well, maybe that's part of the trick is that you can kind of almost do it, but you don't. But then that helps you get the information you need to really support it, so that you actually believe you can do it.
I think that really depends on the kind of guitarist you are, and because you are obviously entirely original. You write your own music and you play and you perform that, and that's.
Thanks. I put my attention there a lot.
I often make videos about music and I talk about the music, and sometimes I use theoretical words and terms, and sometimes people say like he wasn't thinking like that, or you shouldn't theorize Jimi Hendrix, or you shouldn't you cannot say this because he just wrote it when he was stoned, for example. You know. But I just like to give something a name because I'm talking about it.
Yeah,
and it's very difficult to make a video about something and say well, I just feel it, man.
Of course, you wouldn't want to. Yeah,
And even if you're not thinking about it when you're tracking the song or when you're writing it, having a notion of what's happening when you're practicing, that's vastly different. So what's your stance on like theory versus feel, or if that even is something that's conflicting, or is that something you think about?
Well, I do. I mean, I certainly have, and I'm aware of the conversation. You know what you speak to, where there's kind of these. There are folks who feel strongly against the theoretical, and they say it's no, you have to feel it, and those who say no, feel strongly against purely feeling, and say it's about the theoretical. And then there's obviously the marriage of the two that says, well, there's a balance to be struck. I would say I'm probably more in the latter category of thinking that theory. I was such a theory nerd as a kid, as a student. I mean, I read every book I could. I wanted to understand what everything was called. I wanted to.
That's interesting.
And well, maybe similarly to you, it just resonated.
Yeah.
You know, it was just kind of like, I thought, well, that's really cool that we can talk about this thing that's impossible to talk about. You know, in other words, it gave words to something that I was so driven to learn about. So in my case, that became a tool. Not so much for me to navigate the guitar, you know, to say, well, I mean, there are times where you say, well, okay, in the key of E, that's a major seventh, and that's a fourth, and that's a third, and I could also say that seventh could be flat, and that fourth could be natural, that third could be flat, and I'm looking at this from the prism of what are the notes, can they be flat, sharp, what's their relation to the, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. That relationship, or that utility of theory, never got me terribly excited, because I thought it was a little cumbersome. I mean, it's fun to do if you're just kind of thinking and sitting by yourself playing, but realistically, a lot of times music goes very quick.
Yeah, it's way too slow to think about
any of that. You're just kind of, wow, that's cool. You know, it's kind of like, you know, just...
Or it's maybe for like the end note of like the resolution, like let's end on... Oh yeah, the major seven.
Yeah, why do I like it? Oh, it's called a major seven. Oh, good to know. I'll try to find the major seven.
Oh, I love that 9 over the E.
Oh, man. It's gorgeous. Yeah.
That's a 9. Oh yeah, that's why I love it. Yeah.
That's why I love it, yeah.
Yeah.
See, you obviously, that gels with you. You know, there's a marriage there. And that's cool. And that's kind of, to me, it's as simple as that. If you speak that language and you're into it, and it helps you fortify why you like the things you like, or maybe helps you understand why you don't like things you don't like, have at it.
Yeah.
In my experience, though, the theoretical side of it was often more helpful when I would be in conversation with teachers or with other players, or trying to show someone a song.
Okay.
In other words, I think of theoretical language as more, it's a shared language. It's in the simplest terms, it's like it gives us something, a mutually agreed upon language that might be have its flaws, but at least we can speak the same language. So if I'm showing someone a song and I say, well, actually it's a minor 7 flat 5, not a minor 7, and when we get here, I'd like you to hold out this dyad thing, because I'm actually going to do whatever. That comes in handy. It can
shorten the conversation.
It can shorten the conversation, and it can just be, and then yet you could try to convey the same thing to someone who doesn't speak the conversation. And I think, at least for me, it's important to be equally fluent in conveying that emotion without those terms. Okay, when we get to that chord, actually, it's just down a half step.
Yeah.
You know, and when we go there, just do a cluster. That's kind of what I'm looking for. You know, so just keeping in mind that the theoretical utility for me has been less about improvisation and probably more about composition.
Is it again where the more boundaries and the stifleness comes in?
I feel a little more stifled. Well, it's funny. It's funny too, man, because we could talk all day about it, and we won't. Because I want to respect your time. We're okay.
More than an hour we have left, but we probably don't need it. But
I want to be considerate. You know, when we're talking about learning jazz, okay, it's not uncommon. I can't speak to someone coming from a rock and roll background necessarily. I came from blues, which is very connected to it, and frankly, I think rock and roll is too. But I won't pretend to say I know what someone's feeling who's coming from a background other than mine. I don't really know. From my perspective, when I got into jazz, I was fascinated with the sound, the soloing style, the theory, the interaction, the listening, you know, the conversations and the music. And I thought, man, I gotta get that. Like, that's what I want. So where do you begin? Well, very clearly from the beginning, I knew there was a pathway that was maybe more theoretical and incremental. Okay, these are chords, these are the relationships, these are modes, you know, these are 2-5-1s, like, and there's that. But equally as important to me at that point, if not way more important, was the path of learning songs. You know, jazz songs. And I'd say, well, what's that? Oh, that's called My Funny Valentine. I love it. Every time I hear someone play it, I want to play it. So, okay, I'm going to learn My Funny Valentine. And in learning My Funny Valentine, it asks me as the player to deal with certain harmonic movements. And then, okay, well, it has a half diminished chord, and I don't know what that is. So then I go to my teacher, Randy Vincent, and I'd say, what's that? Okay, well, this is what the... And so...
But how would you start? Would you read the chord charts with the top line on the real book, for example, or would you play like a record?
I would do a little bit of both. Okay. You know, at that early stage, I was not a very good reader, and I was... So, excuse me, I think at that early stage what I would do is, I knew I wasn't a good reader, and I knew I wanted to learn this song, so what do? You learn, you read, you practice reading, you know, and so I'd look at the page, and I try to pick out the melody and play the chords, and...
It's like that song, right?
Yeah. It's one of the... Such a good song. You know?
Wow.
It's so good. I haven't played it in a long time.
It's a pleasure to see you play.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's a good one. I mean, that was one of the early ones I learned. But to answer your question, you know, I think it's the love of the song that kind of fuels how you figure out how to play it. I just love it so much. I love when other people play it. And if I have to read it too, I'll get better at reading. If I don't know the chords, I'll figure out what the chord is.
So one thing that I think is very interesting, and I think you said it like a few minutes back, the most important thing is I want to get there.
Yeah.
Like you listen to jazz and you said, I want to get there. Or I want
that. I want to be
that.
that.
I want that.
I want to.
That is the most important thing, I think, because that really sparks that ignition and that fuels the fire that just keeps on going, and you want to practice, get better, read. And that's where all the things that we talked about today come together.
Well, don't you think? I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you. Please.
Yeah, well, I'm finished. This is it, because if you really want to practice, you make sure that you hit every spot we talked about. I think, and it comes naturally.
Right.
And if you don't have that sort of urgency and that sort of need, it's because it's super weird. We spend so much time practicing.
Yeah.
For what? For getting a little bit better.
Well, exactly. It's a little bit crazy. It's a little bit. No, you have to be out of your mind to practice guitar, you know, or practice anything. But no. But in all seriousness, I mean, there's a point of clarification that needs to be made, in my opinion. It's not to say that, well, you want to be good? Well, then just find 11 hours a day for 20 years to practice. Yeah. No, it's not that at all. It's in a way, I guess what I'm speaking to is that it doesn't matter how small the thing is that you're passionate about. Let that be your compass. So maybe it's not, I want to learn jazz guitar, but it's, I'd like to be able to sit on the couch and play My Funny Valentine.
Yeah.
To me, that's a
Yes.
very real and beautiful goal.
That's what I meant.
I know, of course.
Everyone has that wish. I wish
Yeah.
that I could, and that is such a strong motivator.
I think it
and I
is.
think it's the best motivator.
I
Because
think
if
so.
someone else tells you to do something, it
Well,
doesn't really work the same.
It's different. I've seen that. I mean, in music school often you'll experience that where you enter with a love of something very specific.
Mm-hmm.
It might even be like hard to put into words. Like, well, I love playing guitar because it makes me closer to my community.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It might not even be about like anything music. Or I like playing guitar because I play a solo. So when I play a solo, I feel good. Okay, whatever. And then you enter a program that says, well, if you like that, you must care about everything that goes into it. And very often a student will do it because they're told to, invited to, but they actually aren't into music for all of it. They're into it for hanging out with their friends. And I do think it's important if we can go through these cycles to return, hopefully, God willing, to that essence. It can be getting a certain timbre. It can be, I don't know, my father played guitar. You know, he and I started at the same time, and it was so sweet because we would play things together. And I remember, we would, you know, he would play this kind of thing. And I just remember watching him play it. To this very moment, I can picture it where I could see how much he enjoyed that he moved away a certain way. It sounded a certain way. And I just thought, like, it was like Mount Everest. That was it. There was no, like, well, but he really should be. I just thought, well, you should just do the things that feel good and that you like.
I love
And
if only we could go back to that period where we realized we were playing something we heard on the radio and it sounded almost identical.
it's almost like that.
That feel is nothing.
Oh,
There's nothing like it.
there's nothing like it, man. I think now it's never been a better time though to rediscover it. I mean, take for example your offerings. You know, the videos you make. Everyone I've ever seen gets me excited about something that I wasn't previously thinking about, you know? So that's a source of inspiration. You go, wow, that, you know, that's kind of, maybe I could do that. Or maybe that, my favorite art is always when something reminds you of something else, you know, where you hear someone do something and go, that's incredible. But that reminds me, I'm not that good, but I have always wanted to understand how to do this other thing. Yeah. They're very legitimate motivators. They're these, I consider them motivators that are built into the music and in the culture, and to just take them seriously, you know, not bite off too much. That's the one thing I see with jazz education a lot is we express an interest and then we're handed a pile of stuff to learn, and then we go, maybe I'm not that interested, you know. And that's for some people they are that interested in.
Yeah. Do you think it's important if you follow such a program that you do have a notion of like the historical background of jazz, where it comes from? Is it important, do you think, for jazz?
To me it is. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, jazz or any music, any art. I mean, I'm also interested in history, you know. So I think for me that gives it context that jazz is a deep tradition, African American tradition, and a tradition of the world, and something that a tradition of music that has tributaries that connect to absolutely everything in culture, and it's a tradition that's also often synonymous with improvisation, which is tricky because jazz doesn't own improvisation. You know, improvisation is a phenomenon of the world, and it's in every genre, truly. I mean, and in one way or another. But for me, yes, I study the history of the music and the history of the instrument, and it helps me maybe feel less alone.
Is that also why
I play the Telecaster? Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think there was a time where I was looking for grounding in the instrument, you know, where I felt like, okay, I was playing an archtop guitar and I loved that, and then I started playing an old archtop guitar, an old 30s L5, and I loved that.
Oh yeah.
And that really helped me understand, wow, if this is what Eddie Lang was playing, or Nick Lucas, or any of these cats, if this is what they were playing, that's probably why they played the way they did. And then I go, oh, of course, that's why these lines kind of spoke, you know? It's because these guitars speak best when you play that way, okay? And then as I was going into the world of electricity, I thought, well, what's the most kind of I don't know, direct way to get into the electric guitar, and for me it was the Telecaster. And,
Yeah.
and I had a similar feeling as I did with the L5, where I thought, oh, that's why players have played this way, because these guitars respond that way, you know.
That's interesting. What is something that the Telecaster gives you that no other guitar gives you?
Oh Lord, I don't know. You know, I think there's often with Telecasters quite a range as far as the fundamental note, meaning kind of the core of each note. You can always hear that, but depending on how you play it and what your setup is and your touch, you can also get very bright sounds and something that has a lot of sparkly overtone information. And if you move even just a certain way, just for an instance, you can spark this other side of the Telecaster, the kind of growl.
Yeah.
And so I've often loved how with the Telecaster, depending on how I move with the instrument, I can go there to that more aggressive sound, or I can retreat into a more kind of warm. And if I just listen, there's also a lot of mid-range information in there. Like that kind of throttling between touches. I think a Telecaster very often will demonstrate those frequency ranges with great clarity. So I like that, because I go, well, either I'm doing it or I'm not. I'm either getting it. It's not, the guitar's not stopping me really.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it sounds massive, especially with those flatwound strings.
I like these flatwounds.
It is, because I wanted to play the same note, but I just know it won't.
Well,
come
you
out
should
the
do
same.
it. Do it though. Try it.
But you just play. Like it's not as beefy.
It's beautiful though. But see, a Strat, you're playing too.
Yeah, that's.
With the Strat, it has this beautiful air around it. See, that's. Man,
I mean, it's
you
definitely
got
true.
it.
But I think I want to have one guitar.
Yeah.
With flatwounds as well. Because
Flatwounds are cool. They're
Yeah.
cool. They're kind of duddy. You know what I mean? They kind of go like.
they're very strong though.
They're
very strong fundamental. Like
Yes.
it's.
Well, you don't have a lot of the shimmer of the
Yes.
winding. So I
Yes.
think it's probably the fundamental is there. For example, I feel like if I play this guitar with round wounds, but they're quite dead, it's kind of a similar thing.
Oh,
Because
okay.
you still get the core. So this just sounds more like a dead round wound to me. But it is. There's also kind of a. Do you know one of my favorite musicians of all time was a cat named Steve Lacy. Steve Lacy was a soprano saxophone player, and to those obsessed with improvised music, Steve Lacy is a total god. I mean, he just is. He is. And there's a great record of Steve Lacy with Don Cherry, and great trumpet player. And anyway, my point being that Steve Lacy playing the soprano saxophone had this kind of attack thing where every note was very. It kind of had a to every note. There was like, it was kind of blunt, almost like a mallet, mallet kind of percussion. And but he also blended that with this incredible lyricism, And this was a guy who was coming from Dixieland, but also deeply in the avant-garde, and also played with Monk, and was. I mean, we're talking just a very important figure to us. Anyway, I've always felt like flatwounds are the closest to sounding like Steve Lacy on soprano, because there's a little bit of a. It's not a quack. It's not like a quack of a wound string, but you no matter how much you try to smooth it, you always hear this kind of. You hear the note begin. You hear a. I hear it.
Yeah.
And because it's so revealing of your rhythm, then it really rewards when you play with time. So if you... almost like playing with no pitches, you know. And then when you add the pitch, it's just the cherry on top, you know.
That's a beautiful way to put it. I love that. So with you said rhythm and timing. It's obviously very important for you. When you play solo guitar, I love that so much, and the acoustic as well.
Thanks.
There's this lick that you play in Day and Age.
Okay, yeah.
And I love how you phrase that last note. It's this. They are always pushed back so much, and I just love it so much.
That's great. I never noticed that. Well, yeah, that I am fond of those kind of things. Growing up, I feel very lucky. I played with a lot of drummers, jazz drummers. You know, I was always looking for, and I to this day feel this way that, you know, you go to the drums to learn. You know, that's especially in a jazz band. That's everything. You know, and there was a sense that I remember them talking about this, but that with time it matters where you put the beat, where you place things in time. So if you're thinking of time as kind of a continuum, it's not necessarily like you get on this train and you just ride it out. It's a little bit different than groove, I guess what I'm talking about, but they're related. But you know, are you playing your lines really in front of the beat? Are you on the beat? Are you behind the beat? Are your breaks? Are your pauses? Are your pauses rushed? You can rush a pause. You know, you can kind of leave a pause and then jump in a little bit too early, or not too early, whatever it is. You can be really languid, like you were just noting. So I'm gradually leaving a bigger and bigger pause. Yeah. But I would notice all these drummers do that, and we would always talk about Elvin Jones, you know, because Elvin is we're talking about all these masters today. Elvin is the master showing us that you can put the beat anywhere you want at any given time. It's almost like Joe Lovano was talking about this recently. It's kind of like, it's a way of playing where no matter what tempo you're playing a song, you can kind of access all tempos. You can play faster, you can play slower. Kind of like the thing I played a little bit before. I was speeding up, slowing down, going. It wasn't like I locked into a certain beats per minute. And that type of fluidity has always fascinated me. You
hear that, yeah.
Well, and so I would say it comes from a drum tradition. Paul Motion, another great example of that. So these, you know, studying with drummers, I think, is probably why I have an affinity for that thing. And it's so funny that you point that out, because I've never noticed that I do it, not until this very second. So I'm delighted by it.
Yeah.
I want to exaggerate it now. I want to really milk it.
Milk it more.
Milk it. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that this is still rolling.
Make sure you're good.
It's good. We're in 1 hour. That's good.
You're doing so great. So it's nice to be here with you. So, you know, something that I'm thinking about because we're talking, is that, you know, when we talk about practicing, you know, there's often a sense of urgency. There's a sense that I want to get better, and not only do I want to get better, I want to get better fast. You know, I want it now. I want it yesterday. I want it for last week's gig, and I want it now. And I just, you know, that's how I felt so much of my life. This kind of you know, I don't want to say frustration, because that's not quite the word, but urgency. And in my life so far, I realized that it's really important to take care of ourselves as we practice. In other words, this is so often a place, meaning practicing guitar, where it's kind of socially acceptable to be quite hard on ourselves, to kind of be kind of like just kind of beat ourselves up, kind of like
Spartan.
Totally like a general, like, you better, that sucked, you should know that you'll never be as good as this, you know all this, and I think I've just watched that throughout my life, you know, where sometimes I identify with that voice and I say, yeah, I'm gonna do what that person says in my head, you know, and then inevitably what I found is that I think we do get better whether we're hard on ourselves or not. I think as long as we are focused on making the music we want to make, like you so eloquently said before, and we really say, I just want to make sounds that I think are awesome, whatever it takes, I think it helps calm down some of this conditioned thinking that says, I'll be good if I do this, I'll be the right player if I do this, I feel very fortunate. I was relaying this to a class recently about the first record date I did. That was a real professional session. It was with Gary Burton's band. I was maybe 15 years old, 16, something there. Anyway, Makoto Zone was the piano player. Makoto's brilliant. And I was just talking about this. This is why I'm bringing it up, so forgive me if this is redundant out in the world. But basically, we played something, and we went in and listened back. And he heard his solo, and he said, "Woo, that sounds great." And it did. He burned. It was burning. And I remember just watching him in this moment kind of being blown away that you could acknowledge that you liked your... I'd never seen anyone say they liked their own playing. I was kind of like, I can do that? Like, that's not... shouldn't be allowed. And what blew me away was I realized in that moment that that's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to say, I love the way this sounds, and I see where I'd like to get better, and I'd see there's a million things I'd love to get better at and go deeper into. That's always there, but it's not instead of being happy with where you're at.
Actually, I think that's super important that you're happy with how you sound. Maybe the most important thing. If you don't like it, why would other people like it?
Well, if I may,
okay.
We will never know what other people really think of us. We won't. It doesn't matter if any. It doesn't. It might appear that way, but we don't inherently have that. We can't really gauge it, and it's not. I'll say it's not terribly reliable.
We can't control it either.
We can't control it. It's kind of none of our business. So. Though I understand the notion of, how can anyone else accept us if we don't accept ourselves, I completely understand that and agree. I think what's of utmost importance is, from a practicing perspective, is to maybe let yourself off the hook with even that notion, because that might be hard to swallow. And instead say, okay, if I know that I want to be happy when I play, and in this very moment I'm not, because this is realistic, right? We're playing or practicing and saying, well, I would love to love what I'm playing, but to me this sounds like hot garbage. Then where the conversation then goes at that point is often more one of inquiry. And here's what I mean by that. If I play something and I say, well, let me just try it. So that's a chorus of an A blues I'm playing. And again, per what I'm saying, the last thing I want to do is jump on that and say, well, that was great, or that was bad, or it's kind of like, I just need to shut up and ask some questions. So my first question with that is, well, how did that feel? I'm kind of asking myself that. And it felt good. Music's amazing. The guitar's amazing. What's not to like, right? It's all good. If I'm being, going a level below that, though, there was a sense of, I was just kind of nervous. I felt like I was maybe just a little bit unsettled. And I could feel it in the time, and I felt a little worried. Okay, not the end of the world, but this is what I'm talking about. I'm inquiring.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, well, let me try one again. And I'm just going to see what else is happening when I get nervous. It could be in my body, it could be musically, it could be my thoughts, it could be anywhere. And we'll see. Okay, so I did notice something. Different solo, but I would get kind of panicky anytime the chord changed.
Oh.
Which is funny because it's not like, it's not like a big deal, but it was enough to make me go, So let me try one again. Let me kind of turn this around and say, well, if these corners are what's getting me, let me try to play where I purposely just kind of plow through them. Let me just I'm not gonna stop and get worried. I'm just gonna see what happens. And here we go. So now it's a different profile. It's kind of, now it's different. It's just changing. And the question then becomes, well, how did that feel? Well, it felt good, but if again, we could spend hours. I promise I'll just do a couple more and then I'll stop. In that, it felt really nice. However, I felt like I couldn't leave a pause. You know that feeling where you're playing a solo and you're like, this is going great. I better not stop, or else I'll just ruin it. Lose it. And the great irony is that usually what the music needs is a pause, you know? Yeah. So I'm going to face my fear. I'll play a little bit more. And just for the record, this isn't something that I'm recommending for someone to do. I'm just kind of showing you how this is what I'm doing right now in this moment. Yeah. But this is a way of kind of interfacing with practicing that maybe is more considerate of my nature, you know? So, okay, I'm going to do it again. Forget plowing through. Right when I least want to leave a pause, I'm gonna stop.
Okay, yeah.
So, 1, 2, 1, 2. So already I kind of like that because I wanted to hear another chorus. You're playing in such a way where there's a story, right? So anyway, that's the kind of, I feel very silly even saying that's a thing I do because I don't. I just did it right then. But my point was I was trying to just put words to maybe my internal thought process, which is it may be more important than that because that's hardly applicable to anybody but myself, I guess. But is the notion that there's nothing too small to investigate. So if it's a thing that says, well, I'm not trying to be the greatest jazz guitar player in the world, I'm not trying to do this, but I am trying to understand why I get nervous or why I get tripped up, I think that's a very worthwhile use of practice time.
Absolutely. I remember at the conservatory we had lessons for sort of performance lessons.
Yeah.
Because people would tense up.
Yeah.
And if you are tensed up, you lose 50% of your ability, it feels like.
Yeah. So that's why you need 150% ability.
I know. Exactly, yeah.
No, it's true. And also, that, oh God, I have one of my pet peeves often with, especially guitar practice and study is the notion that we have to always be relaxed because it's not relaxing often. And it is, you're talking about playing for a jury or a conservatory or a show. It's a miracle we don't crumble to the ground. But often I do think it's important to know what the sound of tension is. What do I sound? Just because if you just say, if I'm tense, I suck, that's kind of not fair.
It's going to be dangerous.
Well, you're going to spend all that energy trying to not be tense. But if you say, when I'm tense, I just, what happens musically? Often for me, I push the time. Not good or bad, I just push it. I'm more tired after the gig. Again, I can be tired after the gig. It's just good to kind of see them non-emotionally. Yeah. There's the tense thing, there's the relaxed thing, there's the tired thing, there's the caffeinated thing. Wow. Kind of understanding all of it with maybe a sense of equality. Yeah. That's what I prefer, at least.
Very interesting. I love it how you think about music and guitar. It's
thanks for being interested in it.
Are you still sometimes nervous playing?
Oh, I'm nervous living. I don't want to leave my house. No, of course. Okay, yeah. There's I had a teacher years ago. I always will consider him a teacher. David Gorman, who's a great. I knew him from the world of Alexander technique, but he also has done other methods that deal with movement and also performance anxiety. And I remember talking to him about it once, and he had a great point. He's a genius, so one of many. But he was talking about the thought process when we are about to go on stage. And he said that, and I'm paraphrasing him at the moment, but his sense was that very often musicians, performers, we are about to go on stage and we have a desire, unconsciously, that says, I need to go out and not only be amazing right now, but I have to be better than I've ever been in my life. And suddenly and magically possess a life experience that I've never had. I need the life experience of Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Jim Hall. I need it now, And then we go out there and we're nervous, And when he said that, I was so charmed by it because I thought, God, I've done that a million times. You know, he said, what if you said, well, I just want to go out and be as good as I am. You know, I just want to that's my only objective, to sound like I sound. Given the life experience I have at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday, whatever your gig is. And I started playing with that, and it was really helpful because what it helped me see was that there's nerves that are probably for good reason, and then there's nerves that are based on belief systems that we haven't investigated. And what he was talking about was one that is an often uninvestigated belief system that you have to, and if you ask that of any human being to be something they're not and do it in front of people, it's, I hope you're nervous, you know, because it's, you don't, there's good luck, you know. So as you probably can tell from our conversation, I like investigating. And so I'm nervous all the time. My body changes. I played the other night, we played, and I was bigger room than we usually play, and I was kind of terrified the whole set, and it was, but it was okay. I just played. You know what I mean? I was very grateful that it didn't take me
to the ground.
Not to the ground. not in that moment. So no one has it all figured out. Yeah. But it's fun to keep the conversation open about these things. I think it's very human to be nervous.
Yeah, it's important, and I think a lot of people are afraid of performing, of playing, of playing in front of people. Actually, just people looking at your fingers, and I think no one realizes how little people actually judge. In the end, when it comes to it, we're not like how do you say it, like. I think I spun at the wrong note, or
no. People are quite forgiving. People are quite forgiving.
It's lovely to see someone like do their best on stage.
Of course.
And sometimes an accident happens. No one will ever.
Oh no. Those are often the best moments.
Yeah, I know.
There's no question at this point. You know, that we're not going for perfect. Another one of my teachers, Ron Browning. He's in Nashville, and he's a true master, but he works with singers. I'm not a singer, but I went to him because he's kind of the guru of phrasing.
Oh.
And I wanted to understand his phrasing, and my wife had taken a lesson with him, and I just, at this point, we're dear friends, and I just love this guy. He's the best, Ron Browning. But he's got a magical way of explaining phrasing in playing for an audience. I can't do it justice, so I'm just going to paraphrase part of his teaching, which was around playing for an audience and understanding what your job is as the performer. And I thought this was so hip. I'd never heard anyone speak to it this way. And especially the way he spoke about it. Essentially, he talked about the job of the performer is to deliver kind of the facts, you know. It's not our job to be consumed with an emotion, whatever it may be, or a constellation of emotions, and then shove that onto an audience and try to get them to feel what we feel. Mm-hmm. We've all done it, and we've all tried it, but I was so happy, but they seem like they're sleeping, but I was so down, but they're so happy. Like, we're always trying to kind of equalize our experiences. And he put it so great. He said, he's like, man, I've got my own moods. I don't want your moods as the performer. He said, but give me the facts. What's the melody? What's the feel? What's the intent? And he said, if you are in a room of 100 people, or 50 people, or 10 people, or 1,000, and you present the material as clearly, in a way, as unemotionally as possible, just here's what I'm working with, then every one of those 100 people can then project their experience on it. So rather than having one mood that we all agree on, you have 100 moods you could never imagine. And I do think it's essential that we know that the audience, and we know that as fans, right?
Yeah.
We watch music and we're projecting like crazy. We're putting our experience onto the music. We're telling the band what they feel like.
Yeah.
And when he talked about that, it was such a relief, because I started listening to music that way and realizing everything I love. It's people are just Aretha Franklin. She's giving it to Charlie Parker. Here it is, Monk. Here it is. It's not, I feel this way about it, and I really need you to. He just made it very clear. Just give it to me straight, man. And
that's so cool. I love it.
It helped to know, especially because this has come up today, the conversation of you can't control what other people think of you, and I just want to say we really can't control. So, but we can go another direction, and make sure that we're engaged with the music, and that's kind of the job, isn't it?
I love it.
something.
Yeah. Is it possible to play a snippet of Day and Age?
Oh yeah.
I would just love to hear,
Of course,
hear a little bit.
man, of course.
Wow. Beautiful.
Thanks, man.
That's really... I love the freedom you have and no boundaries, as you said. I just saw it. But still within the song.
It's still, see, the song's the boundary,
oh,
man.
wow, yeah.
Songs are boundaries. Spaces are boundaries. Tone is bound. I mean, it's fun, right?
I love it. I'm super inspired.
Thanks, Paul. It's
All right.
such a pleasure. Thank
Yeah.
you for taking the time to just even be curious about all this stuff. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for dropping by and showing
Anytime,
your
man.
wisdom and some words of inspiration to me, to all of you.
Of course, man.
And I'm going to see you play tonight.
I can't
very
wait.
excited for
I
that.
came out
Yeah,
glad
yeah,
you'll be
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Thanks, brother.
And everyone watching, of course, all the links to Julian are below. Follow him and go see his shows because it's a hell of an experience.
Thank you.
Thank you for your generosity.
Thank
and
you, brother.
see you around.
See you.
Bye.
Dude, is that all right?
Oh, I'm blown away. Speechless a little bit.
I'm so glad. Well, thank you. Thanks for
Like the final performance. That was the first song I saw of you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was like, whoa, who is this? Who is this guy?
Yeah, what's he doing?
What is he playing?